तांकर अभिज्ञता अभिज्ञता अच्छी भिन्न भिन्न जगह से भारत रत्न प्रणब मुखर्जी जे राष्ट्रपति भारत वर्ष थे तांका संगे से बहुत वर्ष कार्य करछंती डिफेंस मिनिस्ट्री फाइनेंस मिनिस्ट्री और फॉरेन अफेयर्स मध्य से आज हम बजेट उपर आलोकपात करेंगे और केमती बजेट जरिया हमर ये दूरीकरण हम बेकारी दूरीकरण हम से मत बुझेबे तापरे आम संगे अच्छा बिरंच मिश्र से ओडिशा सरकार को जुग्म सचिव हिसाब से काम करथिले।
सर विवेक सर आपनकर वीडियोटा कटि गला।
हाँ मु काटी देथिले मझरे ठीक अछि। हाँ ठीक अछि मु जस्ट मिनिट
सर
स्टार्ट ओके काटी देथिले मझरे ठीक अछि
सर
भलो रिसेप्शन अछि पे मु वीडियो काटी देथिले। अच्छा ठीक अछि सो बिरंच मिश्र जो अछंती से होचंती ओडिशा सरकार के जुग्म सचिव थे पर्यटन विभाग रे तांकर बहुत पर्यटन पर बहुत अभिज्ञता अच्छी से अवसर मिला पर व्यस्त अच्छा काम वर्तमान से भिन्न भिन्न टूरिज्म मैनेजमेंट कोर्स रे लेक्चर दियंती बहुत सेमिनार से मतामत दियंती टूरिज्म डेवलपमेंट पर से सेंट्रल यूनिवर्सिटी पंडिचेरी रे मत लेक्चर दियंती एठी इंडियन इंस्टीट्यूट ऑफ टूरिज्म एंड ट्रैवल मैनेजमेंट लेक्चर दियंती और एठी सम यूनिवर्सिटी सोआ यूनिवर्सिटी सेठी मत से लेक्चर दियंती तांकर अभिज्ञता अछि आपण मान निश्चय जानिबो चाहथिबे जे टूरिज्म संगे बजट कोन संपर्क अब मो कहबा कथा टूरिज्म गोटे शिल्प और टूरिज्म जरिया बेकारी केमी दूरीकरण हो पार विशेष करी ग्राम्य अंचल में केमी पर्यटन को अधिक करा से द्वारा केमी ग्राम्य अंचल में बेकारी दूरीकरण हो पार से विषय मतामत देवे। आज आलोचन इंग्रेजी और ओडिया मिशा मिशेक हम कारण जो विषय वस्तु पर चर्चा हम से विशेषकर टेक्निकल सब्जेक्ट अच्छी से ओडिया बुझेले एत सुविधा हो पार ना से ओडिया इंग्रेजी मिशामिशी करके चर्चा हम मो खाली मोर गोटे अनुरोध जे वर्तमान समस्ते म्यूट रखु बरदास प्रसन्न दास से समस्त अनुरोध करूँ समस्ते म्यूट करूँ जिते प्रोफेसर सत्यनारायण मिश्र तांके लेक्चर देवे सी अनम्यूट करेंगे सी लेक्चर देला जो प्रश्न उत्तर दिहब से जी प्रश्न पचार से चैट बॉक्स प्रश्न पचार पार चैट बॉक्स बरदा प्रसन्न दास पढ़े और जहाँ प्रश्न पचार कही से तार उत्तर देवे ये कही मोर वक्तव्य ये शेष कली शेष जेहेतु सभापति कुर्ची सभा मोर वक्तव्य मु शेष देवी। बहुत धन्यवाद।
धन्यवाद सर। बर्तमान आम कार्यक्रम आरंभ करवा गोटे कथा मु वक्ता मान को अनुरोध करी जेहेतु दिस इज नॉट एकेडमिक प्लेटफॉर्म दिस इज इंटेलेक्चुअल कम पब्लिक प्लेटफॉर्म तेणु आमर जो वक्तव्य गुड़ाक से इट विल बी मोर कम्युनिकेबल एंड इजियर टू अंडरस्टैंड से दिगरे दृष्टि देवे। वर्तमान कथा होमर ओडिशा रे राज्य सरकार एठी गोटे स्थिर सरकार केंद्र रे भी गोटे स्थिर सरकार किंतु अस्थिर है युव समाज पाठ पढ़ुछंती चाकरी नहीं आम पैसा पैसा कार लोकंकर पैसा खर्च करछंती सरकार सरकार गोटे खर्चर हिसाब कर खर्चर हिसाब से राजस्व आय रोचे एवं किति ऋण भी रोचे ऋण जनतार भी ऋण भार भी आम बढ़ी बढ़ी चली आमर हिसाब ठीक भाव में चली एवं बड़ बड़ विशेषज्ञ माने ये सब करूछन किंतु देखा जाउची विकास हो नहीं नो किंतु बेकारी माने टिके पथभ्रष्ट हो जाइछंती एवं दरिद्र दूरीकरण दिगरे किभଳି भाबरे बजेट सहायक होईची सही स्पेसिफिक परिसीमा भितर आमे आज आलोचना करिबा एवं जो माने प्रश्न पचारिबे से माने शेष रे तांको प्रश्न गुडी को पचारिबे वर्तमान आमे आलोचना आरंभ करिबा आजिर प्रथम वक्तव्य रखिया पई मु अनुरोध करछि श्रीयुक्त सत्यनारायण मिश्र जे कि वर्तमान अर्थनीति रे अध्यापक अछंती किट विश्वविद्यालय रे एवं तांकर केंद्र सरकारଙ୍କର बजेट प्रस्तुत रे बहु अभिज्ञता रहिछि तांको अनुरोध करबी से तांकर वक्तव्य प्रदान करबी श्रीयुक्त सत्यनारायण मिश्र
समस्त मोर नमस्कार मोर टिके अनम्यूट कर देबे आज्ञा मोर टिके एनेबल करिवे पीपीटी शेयर करिया पे
हां हां
आपण माने थिंकर्स क्लब मते आज ए गोटे सुजोग दैचंती मु आपन पाखे निश्चित भाव ऋणी पर्टिकुलरली मोर सीनियर कलीग मेंटर एंड डिस्टिंग्विश्ड सिविल सर्वेंट मिस्टर विवेक पटनायक जहाँ को मु लूपिंग लियोपार्ड बोली कहे इंटेलेक्चुअली तांको पर्टिकुलरली लेट मी पे माय कॉम्प्लीमेंट्स टिके मते शेयर स्क्रीन शेयर करा टिके देबे काइंडली प्लीज अलाउ मी टू शेयर माय स्क्रीन
Sir, you can share your screen. You are allowed to share your screen.
When I am doing that, it is saying host disabled participant screen sharing. Okay, dekh lijiye kindly.
Okay, so let me make you the host.
Please make me the host. I'll operate.
Okay. Sir, done. Can you check now?
Yeah, please. Can you all see the screen which I have shared now?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. We can.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
I will take about 25 to 30 minutes to share my thoughts. जेहेतु मु अर्थनीति रे अनेक समय काम करछि आपण माने सब सुनले खुशी हेबे मु 1977 रे मोर फर्स्ट असाइनमेंट थिला फाइनेंस मिनिस्ट्री रे एज अ बजेट ऑफिसर सो मु प्राय 44 वर्ष हला बजेट संगे ओतप्रोत भाबे जडित अछि let me share my thoughts. The last budget which was presented by the finance minister, as all of you know, was in the cusp of a real economic tumult, depression, and more importantly, enormous amount of uncertainty lay ahead. And the FM quoted the Nobel laureate Rabindranath Tagore, who had very famously written that faith is the bird that fills the light and sings when the dawn is still dark. So her faith has been absolutely vindicated. If you see that before the budget, the finance minister presented the economic survey, which is basically a snapshot of the Indian economy. And as all of you could see, that compared to 2021, when our industry was down by 7%, manufacturing by 7.2%.
Excuse me,
Yes.
full screen करी हवा कि टिके full screen करी हवा कि slide show रे click करे बस full screen हे जाई परिबो. Kindly see that.
Let me see if I can do that. Just 1 second. देखा जाउनी कि सर देखा जाउनी कि
1% देखाउने 22-23
अच्छा ठीक अछि मते टिके डिफिकल्टी होछि टिके
ना ठीक अछि चलंतु प्लीज गो
से सेठी गोटे थिबो गोटे स्लाइड शो रे गोटे आइकन थिबो ताकू आपण क्लिक कर देले फुल स्क्रीन आसी जिवो किबा F5 फंक्शन 5 को क्लिक करले आसी जिवो फुल स्क्रीन प्लीज ट्राई करंतु
अच्छा हो मो देख
किछि असुविधा नाही यदि असुविधा होछि करिया पे गो अहेड प्लीज गो अहेड
I am having little difficulty
please
as
go
I was
ahead.
mentioning that compared to 2021, which was the real economic difficult economic year, we have come out practically in every sector. Agriculture has been doing well. This is the only sector which was not affected during the pandemic. Industry, manufacturing, services, trade, hotel. But most importantly, the GDP is up, should be up by about 9%. And for 22-23, the government, the economic survey has pitched it between 8 to 8.5%. That's the growth that we are expecting. And the Reserve Bank yesterday has mentioned that they have pitched it around 7.8%. The point is that, there is an all-round optimism that we are doing well this financial year and should do well next year. But more importantly, let us see the global macroeconomic trends. And you'll find that as per the latest Economist, almost every country is now clocking a positive GDP. India has been at the forefront, as you would see that compared to China, which is likely to clock about 5% plus. India will do about 7%. But the very something is two areas. One is inflation. In fact, the recent assessment is that US has been witnessing for the first time with inflation of around 6%. That also continues to be a problem with India. And the second very important problem has been the issue of unemployment. As you would see that Euro area, around 7% is the unemployment. India, it's hovering around 6.6 to 7%. So unemployment is a big challenge. So is inflation, looming inflation. And the third thing is that the fiscal deficit. As you would see that for the first time, even countries like Japan, countries like China have a huge fiscal deficit. India also has been in the grip of a huge fiscal deficit. Now, in this backdrop, the budget has been a very, very important policy denouement by the finance minister. And some of the important aspects, of course, has been a significant increase in capital expenditure by about 35%. The productivity-linked incentive scheme to boost export and to create about 60 lakh jobs. Very importantly, fiscal consolidation, because just before the budget, there was a debate when whether the finance minister should continue with fiscal profligacy, or as you say, fiscal stimulus, or she should rein in fiscal stimulus and go for curtailing borrowing. She has very wisely opted for fiscal consolidation. The thrust on digitization is very clear, both in education sector and economy as a whole. Two very good things that the finance minister has done, providing drinking water, Nal Se Jal, to another about 4 crore households, over and above 8 crores, and 80 lakh new houses. The ECLGS scheme for the small and medium enterprises has been extended till 31st March 23. I would like to mention here that the MSMEs have been the backbone of India's economy. It employs close to 11 crore people. It contributes to about 30% of our GDP and about 45 to 50% of our exports. So a very, very important sector. And the finance minister did extremely well in March 20 by pushing close to 3 lakh crores which were collateral free. And that has been a godsend to the SME sector. In fact, in the budget, she mentioned that close to 1.3 crore people in the SME segment have benefited from this credit guarantee scheme, which she unveiled in March 20. Let's look at the budget at a glance. As you would see, that compared to revenue deficit, tax revenue deficit about 3 lakh crores, we are on the bend and we are improving. And particularly, she mentioned in the budget that in the month of January, India clocked the highest collection in GST of about 1.4 crores. So revenue, which was dipping, is on the mend. It is on the upward trajectory. I would say that she is a little conservative in her estimate. I would say that possibly the tax revenue collection would be better. Non-tax revenue, again, up, but I'm a little disappointed that our target for next year has been rather less. Borrowing is something which worries me. As you would see that in 1920, the total borrowing was about 9 lakh crores, which went up to 18 lakh crores during 2021. But during 21-22, it would be in the range of about 16 lakh crores. And in the coming year, 22-23, it continues to be about 16.5 lakh crores. This is an area which I like to flag as I go along. A very, very good thing about the budget is the increase in the allocation to capital expenditure. Now, I was going through the budget of almost 35 years. I didn't find a single budget before 2013 when we have not surrendered funds in capital expenditure. As all of you know, capital expenditure is essentially for asset creation. And if you see that capital expenditure during 1920 was just about 3.3 lakh crores. And in 22-23, it is more than double, double of the capital expenditure of 1920. So this is a very, very significant thing. If I have to take out one significant thing out of the budget, it is the humongous increase in expenditure for asset creation. And but as I said, I'm still quite wary about the fiscal deficits. So if I take a snapshot of the budget at a glance, we are doing well in taxation. I would say that the finance minister has been less than buoyant in projecting a modest target. We are the areas to watch for would be borrowing, because this can have implication on inflation. Because many people believe that this would have a potential of increasing our inflation beyond 6%. But a good thing, as I said, is the capital expenditure. Now I come to the main gravamen of this particular discussion, which is on employment. Now, whenever we talk of employment, we go back to John Maynard Keynes and his seminal book, The General Theory of Employment, Interest and Money. This was published in 1936. एटा से अमेरिका रे इकोनॉमिक डिप्रेशन समर लिखितले जो समय रे अमेरिका रे unemployment was about 29% and the GDP had shrunk by 28%. I say somewhere Franklin D. Roosevelt was the president. So during 1930s, for the first time, Keynes said that there is no concept of automatic equilibrium. Don't think that depression will go away automatically. So for the first time in general theory, he highlighted the importance of employment, full employment. So there were three things that he talked of. If there was a Nobel Prize at that time, unfortunately, the Nobel Prize was instituted in 1968. If there was a Nobel Prize, he should be the first proud recipient of that. So four things he said: employment, effective demand, consumption function, and multiplier. So these are the four very, very important concepts he mooted. And he also said that the total income of a country is actually a summation of consumption, investment, and government expenditure. Without making it too technical, in very simple terms, total final consumption of private individuals, government expenditure, and investment. So what did we notice during, why is he so relevant? Why is Keynes so salient? Now, during the depression, during the pandemic, the consumption, which accounts for about 60% of our India's national income, that fell down by almost 10%. So therefore, if we want to revive consumption, so therefore what we have to do, one is that we have to revive private investment. We have to create enabling conditions. We must also bolster private public investment. Now, as all of you know, 1991 was a turning point. It was a watershed moment for India, where when we decided that the government should come out of investment and create more enabling environment for the private sector. But as I have mentioned here, that compared to about 29% investment in 2006-2007, today, the private investment is down to 22%. I want all of you to kindly keep a note. When we talk of investment, we find that in India, in the course of the last 10 years, private investment has fallen by almost 7%, while the public investment has remained stagnant around 7%. So when I mentioned the budget at a glance, and I focused on public expenditure or capital expenditure, this is something that the government has done for the first time. So it has come out of that 7% groove and would be spending close to 11%. So that's a very, very important thing. Now, if you see the sectoral trends in India, you'll find that between 1950, when we had the 51, when we had the first plan, and now you'll find that the sector which has stagnated is industry. If you see 1950, Vivek sir, you'll find that the share of industry was 26% and the employment was also 26%. So the same thing persists in 2020. Whereas in agriculture, the reduction in population is just about 10%, but the share has fallen to almost 17%, as against a share of 50% in 1950, it is now about 17%. The sector which has really done well is the services, where the share has gone up to almost 60%, but it accounts for only 25% of the employment. Now, this is a very interesting table. I wrote an article for International Finance Journal. Now, this is where I bring out that the growth story of India after 1999 is a story of growth-job mismatch. Now, if you see here, between 2004 to 2009, just pay a little attention, sir, that between 2004 and 2009, when the average growth of India was around 8.7%, the employment grew by only 0.1%. Even between 2011 to 2015, when the growth was around 7%, the employment growth was only 0.6%. This was largely because most of the growth took place in the service sector and your manufacturing sector was stagnant. So therefore, the growth story that India has witnessed is accompanied by very, very stagnant manufacturing sector and a service sector which is booming but doesn't have the potential to absorb more and more employment. I take it forward. We also see that when you see the NSSO survey, you find that there is also a rising trend of the educated unemployed. Whenever we talk of unemployment, most of the time we talk of the unskilled workers. But the situation in India is that between 2004 to 2005 and 2017 to 2018, whether we talk of the rural area, male or urban male or female, you clearly see that there is a significant increase in unemployment level. Particularly if you see urban female, the unemployment percentage has gone up from almost 15% to 27%. So the other thing that I thought I'll just mention in the context of employment, that in India, on an average, about 12 million people are looking for jobs of different types, skilled, unskilled, highly skilled. And India, unfortunately, has about 90% unorganized people who work in the unorganized sector and just about 10% in the organized sector. This is just the reverse in most of the developed countries. You know, if I have to make a difference between US or European countries, Japan and India, that is the main difference, that we have a huge unorganized sector. then when we talk of the sectoral composition, agriculture has a huge amount of disguised employment. People, say 20 people working in 2 acres of land. This is what Ragnar Nuxey famously called as disguised employment. Then if you look at the people who are working, very sadly, about 85% people are unskilled. And about 10% are skilled. And people like you and me are the highly skilled, which is just about 5%. But if you look at a country like Germany, you'll find the percentage of skilled would be about 70%. Highly skilled would be about 20%. Unskilled would be just about 10%. So when we discuss employment and the potential of a budget to mitigate unemployment, you have to keep in mind the sectoral reality of India. These are the structural realities of India. Very, very large numbers in unorganized sector, very large numbers who are unskilled. Now, in this backdrop, one of the famous economists, Nicholas Calder, he was of the view that please focus on manufacturing. And he was the one, he is famous for his 3 laws. But the first law is that GDP is positively linked to manufacturing. And the second law was productivity is very strongly linked to manufacturing. So it's just not people putting people into manufacturing, also skilling them, which is extremely, extremely important. Now, you'll be happy to know, friends, that in 2011, there was a report which is called the National Manufacturing Zone Policy. I had the good fortune of being part of Mr. Krishnamurthy's committee. We submitted its report in 2011. Now, what are the broad recommendations of the committee? That if you are looking for about 10 to 12 million jobs, additional jobs every year, you need to create manufacturing zones. And that would increase your manufacturing share from about 16% to 25%. This is extremely, extremely important. We said that by 2020, we should try to increase the share of manufacturing to GDP from about 16 to 25%, because we found that Germany, Japan, South Korea, all these countries, manufacturing accounts for close to 30 to 35%. So the point which I'm trying to highlight is, as I mentioned right in the beginning, that we have a very stagnant manufacturing sector, and that's not contributing to much of an employment growth. Now, what are the latest unemployment trends? Now, if you see the report, which has just come from the Center for Monitoring Indian Economy, Mahesh Bas, the editor, a good friend of mine. Now, he says that the unemployment rate today in India is about 7.31% overall, and the percentage in urban area is around 7.9% and 7% in the rural area. And when we make a disaggregation between male and female, male is around 6.8%. So female workforce participation is very low, 19.9%. Unemployment graduates is around 19.4%. Now, as against the overall global employment rate of 55% in 2020 at the height of pandemic, India was looking at around 43%. And the last finding of the CMI is that about 35 million people are looking for jobs, of which about 22% are women. In this backdrop, it is very important that we talk of the Manrega program, where the act was issued in 2005. And this is consistent with Indian Constitution, Article 41, who talks about right to work. Now, this particular act mandated that you have to provide 100 days of work to rural unskilled. And they are supposed to create durable assets like roads, canals, ponds, wells, afforestation. And this is a program which has benefited close to 5 crore households per year. And the major beneficiaries have been SC, ST, women. And it has not discriminated in terms of wage between men and women. This is very, very important. And by a survey by National Council of Applied Economic Research, it has reduced India's poverty by almost 33%. Now, between 1990, when it was around 48%, now it is around 24%. Now, 1/3 of it has been due to the Manrega program. So many of the economists, development economists, they believe that that there is a very strong case for extending this Manrega program to the urban area. People like Professor Rangarajan, who was RBI governor, before the budget, he made a very, very strong pitch that if through the rural Manrega program, we have been able to provide work to about 7 crore people in the rural areas, which also helped the migrant workers from getting jobs. Why are we not extending to urban areas? And also, there is also a strong demand that why don't we increase it to about 150 days? So therefore, I finished my employment module by suggesting that what is the strategy that we require for mitigating unemployment. Now, if you look at economic modeling, the first model was given by Arthur Lewis. The Jamaican economist who got Nobel Prize, he was of the view that countries which are very surplus in labor, particularly in the rural areas, should shift most of this labor to manufacturing sector. And there was also a thrust that we should create more and more manufacturing hubs. And as I have mentioned in my previous presentations, that countries like China have, which adopted the Lewis model, have very significantly benefited from the shift of large number of rural people to the manufacturing sector. So therefore, we need to revive the MSMEs, particularly the micro enterprises. I would like to highlight here that one of the very disquieting lessons as far as the MSMEs is concerned, that while during the pandemic, the small and medium enterprises were benefited, the micro enterprises, which is a value of up to about 5 crores, and which constitute almost 92% of your MSME sector, they didn't benefit properly. In fact, the credit offtake to the micro enterprises has been very little. So therefore, while we say that MSME sector has been doing well, we are actually forgetting that a very large proportion of the SME sector, particularly the micro enterprises, have not really benefited much from the credit guarantee scheme. In fact, in one of the recent articles, the Economist has very beautifully summed up that what India needs to do is to formalize its informal economy, and by which they mean that you must ensure access to credit from formal sources, digitization, Industry 4.0, so the technology access to the MSME sector. So these are some of the major recommendations. Now, one of the very interesting debate which has been going on in India is between Arvind Subramanian, who was the previous chief economic advisor, and Danny Roderick from Stanford, a brilliant economist. Now, while Arvind Subramanian believes that we need to extend our Manrega program and extend it to the urban areas, Danny Roderick believes that the future of India lies in skilling. He said, we cannot perpetuate this strategy of just giving work to unskilled workers. If we really want to come out of this income trap, the income differential, you need to provide quality training and make the unskilled worker skilled. So therefore, it's very, very important that when we discuss about employment, we have to understand the strategy. You'll find that many of the development economics like John Drage and all, they believe that please do concentrate on providing employment to the unskilled workers. But I find a lot of merit in what Danny Roderick mentions, that we need to have a strategy where we try to provide more skilling to the unskilled workers. There is another very interesting debate which has been going on, which is what Raghuram Rajan said, that we must come out of the manufacturing-led growth strategy of China to a service-led growth. In fact, in an interview very recently, just before the budget, Raghuram Rajan mentioned that China is failing. So as an economy. So therefore, we need to come out of this manufacturing-led growth or the export-led growth to a service-oriented growth. Education services, whole host of health services. So we must try to take advantage of that. So now, having said all this, let me come to a few more areas. I'll spend another 6-7 minutes. Whenever I discuss any issue pertaining to India, I always fall back on the Indian Constitution. So it not only provides at Article 112 that you must have a budget, but it also says a few things, very, very important things. These important things are, first is socio-economic justice for all, minimization of income inequality, distribution of resources to subserve common good, avoid concentration of wealth, right to work, and very, very importantly, early childhood care and education in Article 45, and raise the level of nutrition. These are not idle surmises in the Indian Constitution. They are a set of clear commitments for a welfare-oriented government. Now let us see what is happening. Now, when you look at income inequality, the latest World Inequality Report, edited by Abhijit Banerjee, and Abhijit Banerjee brings out how the top 10%, just see the top curve, how the 10% of India's top income earners account for almost 60% of the total income, whereas bottom 50 today account for just about 15%. And you will also see, sir, that between 1980, when we made halting inroad into economic liberalization, how the gap between the top 10% and the bottom 50% has widened very, very significantly as we are looking at 2020. Now, this is largely because of a public policy or a tax policy which has generally helped the super rich, the rich. Look at hunger, which is one of the mandates. You'll find that close to 36% of our children are anemic. You look at the status of girls, anemia is more than 50%. So these are clear goals where we haven't done well. Learning, if you look at the ACR finding, the learning outcomes have been very, very dismal. And a very large number of children, very interestingly, that after right to education was introduced in 2009, the percentage of children who are going to private school has increased from 15% to 30%. Look at the irony that when the government is giving education free, the percentage of children who are going to private school has almost doubled, which is basically a reflection of the very, very poor quality of schooling, public schooling, its infrastructure that we're having. And very importantly, I would like to highlight that the share of education in expenditure as a share of GDP is just about 3%. Now, if you see, the center was spending close to 0.55% in 2015-16, and in 22-23 budget, it has come down to 0.38%. Whereas the states, you'll find the education, education is a concurrent subject, states have been spending 2.6 to 2.7. But there are very interesting examples of Kerala, Delhi, and Gujarat, where you find in Kerala and Delhi, where they spend close to 4% of their GDP, almost 20% of their budget, 20 to 25% of the budget is spent on education, where a rich state like Gujarat spends just about 12% of their budget, about 2.8%. Now, that takes me to the social sector investment. Now, you will find that in the social sector investment, particularly for a program like Manrega, there is a severe reduction in the allocation from almost 1.1 lakh crore to about 70,000 crores. Now, very interestingly, close to 25,000 crores out of the 73,000 crores is aerial from the previous year. So we are just 50% of the allocation to 1.11 lakh. What hurts me the most is the allocation to the midday meal program. Now you will see that from 13,400 crores, we have brought it down to 10,200 crores. So therefore, it is a very sad commentary that when you look at allocation to social sector, particularly programs like Manrega, ICDS, MDM, we are not doing enough. Now I come to another very important area, which is borrowing. Now here we have a wonderful theory by a wonderful economist from Harvard, Kenneth Rosoff. He writes regularly in Business Standard, a brilliant guy. Now Rosoff said that if your debt to GDP ratio is more than 90%, you are looking at low and negative growth. If your borrowing is about 30 to 90% to 60%, you are quite safe. And it was proved to be very prescient in Greece, where the total debt went up to about 160%. So India had an act called the FRBM Act called 2003, where we said that we must reduce it to about 3%. Now, today in 2022, I have a gross debt of center and state combined is about 90%. Right in the beginning, ab initio, I mentioned that one of the serious problems that confronts India is borrowing. And there is a fiscal path that India is supposed to follow. And you'll find that India's borrowing to GDP is consistently increasing from 48% to 59% to around 60%. So central debt to GDP is really at a danger mark. But the other thing that we find is that the tax to GDP continues to be very, very low. Most of the developed countries have a tax collection of almost 30%. China has a tax collection about 20%. So while we are quite gung-ho about GST doing well, but the overall tax collection has been rather dismal. And very surprisingly, for 22-23, the finance minister has pieced a lower tax to GDP ratio. Now, Arun Jaitley, my dear friend, he, in a very interesting budget speech in 2017, he brought out how in India, we have an all-pervasive tax evasion. He brings out how, only 12, just about 1.272 lakh returns were filed, which are above 50 lakhs. Whereas during demonetization, they found that almost 148 lakh accounts had deposits above 80 lakhs. And he also clearly mentioned that people have been evading tax, and on top of it, we do not have a GAR mechanism, general anti-avoidance regulations. So therefore, our tax collection is very low. So I end with three more slides. Now this is how, if you have to evaluate a budget, you need to have three parameters. Professor Richard Musgrave, who is considered to be an authority in public finance, he said that if you have to judge a budget, you have to look at
I have not placed any requirement.
You need to look at three things.
Thank you.
First is the allocational priority. What kind of priority you are giving to social sector over economic sector, over defense? What kind of distributive justice you have? Are you having a highly progressive tax on super rich and a modest tax rate on middle class? And the third thing he flagged was economic stability. That is, your inflation, your unemployment, and your foreign exchange variation should be less than 5%. I'm mentioning this because if we have to evaluate Nirmala Sitharaman's budget, we have to look at this. Now, as I said, the allocational priority, if you see the graphs, you will find that we spend just about 7% in the social services, whereas in most developed countries, the spending is around 35%. On the other hand, India spends close to 50% of its budget on general services, which account for three things: borrowing, subsidy, and defense. Borrowing is 35%. Borrowing, subsidy, and defense. Humongous amount is spent on these three things. So let me end by looking at the hits and the misses. As far as the hits are concerned, quite clearly the significantly higher public investment must be complemented. And she is putting a lot of money on roads and railways. As all of you know, that many of the projects of Orissa have been approved. Continued support to SME is a step in the right direction. Thrust on PIL to generate employment exports is again a good scheme. Digitization. I'm particularly very happy about two things. One is that there is no doles to the farmers. This PM Kisan, where we are transferring about 5,000 rupees for the farmers, accounting for almost 1.5 lakh crores, that has not been given. But the more important thing is that there is no further capital infusion to the public sector banks. We have already put to the budget about 3.5 lakh crores. So the finance minister has done very, very well. That it is a good lesson to all the public sector banks to better buck up. What are the misses? I have quite a few misses. The first miss for me, that while the finance minister has charted a very wonderful growth trajectory for the next 25 years, but there is no development path. There is no clear human development path. So therefore, as Chief Justice Chandrachud used to say, that growth and development are like two wheels of an economy's chariot. If you want to move an economy in a harmonious way, apangra dita chokko, economic growth or human development. Apan dekhantu, we are spending just about 3% of our GDP versus 6% of GDP, which was recommended by Kothari Commission in 1966. I'm not coming to Amartya Sen. Even in the National Education Policy 2020, they very, very strongly recommended, please increase it to 6%. Education, health we spend 1.3% as against 3%. Two very, very major sectors which are responsible for human development. The second point I would like to highlight, that our entire approach to growth is based on borrowing. As I have mentioned, that we are borrowing close, we're going to borrow close to 16 lakh crore. That's a humongous thing. And then we are not improving our tax GDP ratio. We keep on saying that GST we are increasing, but we don't realize that GST is regressive. The soap that I use, I pay the same GST as the boy who is helping me out in the house. So therefore, it is an extremely regressive tax. So therefore, our focus should be on increasing direct tax collection. So therefore, today, India has 50% direct tax collection, 50% GST, like Good Day Biscuit, 50-50. But in most developed countries, 80% is the direct tax collection. Indirect tax collection is extremely regressive. And as far as employment is concerned, which is the main theme of this particular webinar, as I said, that we are just able to provide just about 1 million as against a requirement about 10 million. So therefore, there should be an increased thrust in creating this national investment manufacturing zones, manufacturing hubs. Special economic zones, he has mentioned that they are going to change the laws, but we are not doing well there. MSMEs require Industry 4.0. So therefore, we must, the budget is a little disappointing that it has not given enough incentive to the industry to really buck up their spending or their investment activity. The last thought I'll just mention is that our R&D allocation remains less than 1%. I distinctly remember in 2012, when Dr. Manmohan Singh was releasing the document for the 12th plan, I was present. So he asked Mantek, have we crossed 1%? So he said, what, sir? 1% in R&D. He said, no, sir. He asked a second question, that our maternal mortality rate at that time was 172. So he asked him, have we reduced it to double digit? He said, no, sir. So I'm just mentioning to you, going back in history, that we have not been spending adequately on research and development. That's the key to productivity. So for me, the budget has done well in capital expenditure, but in terms of human development, in terms of improving our tax to GDP collection, in its thrust for employment, for improving productivity in terms of R&D allocation, and the last but not the least is the concept of distributive justice, which I mentioned about one of the benchmarks of fiscal prudence. So in terms of increasing the tax rate, that, if you read the World Inequality Report, so Piketty mentions that if you increase, you'll find that the top tax rate has come down in Europe and US from 58% to 27%. Between 1958 to 1985 to now, the average tax rate in US and Europe has come down from close to 58% to about 27%. And he says that if you increase it by just 1%, you collect close to $242 billion. The report fervently requests all the governments that please, I'm not asking to increase the tax rate to 60%, 70%, as Piketty did in his seminal book, Capital. Increase it by a token amount. And that would be sufficient to put money into many of the social sector programs, which will contribute to long-term human productivity. So therefore, in terms of distributive justice and shared prosperity, about which Joseph Stiglitz keeps on mentioning, I think the budget hasn't really proved to be a real joy to read. So to end, Jeffrey Sachs, one of the pioneers of the Millennium Development Goals, one of the four front runners in Sustainable Development Goals, in his most wonderful book, The Price of Civilization, wrote, our greatest illusion, he talks in terms of the United States, our greatest illusion is that a healthy society can be built on mindless pursuit of wealth. Now, this particular statement is equally applicable to India, and this pursuit of wealth must be converted to pursuit of happiness, human development, and productivity. Thank you for your patient hearing.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor. It was most excellent lecture on budget that I have heard in the last couple of years. Professor Mishra, because of his background in the economic service, the Defense Account Service and International Monetary Fund, having worked in the government of India with Bharat Ratna Pranab Mukherjee, has tremendous experience, apart from practical experience, in addition to his understanding economics, that has contributed to this excellent lecture. I would recommend that his lecture with PowerPoint presentation should be made available to each member of the Thinkers Club. And also, I would suggest to Mr. Swadesh Patnaik that he should obtain a copy from Professor Mishra and get it distributed among the members of the think tank and members of Inglomacy who are also participating. Thank you very much. Congratulations. You started the lecture with Rabindranath Tagore's quotation, ended with Jeffrey Sachs. I would recommend also to those who are listening to this discussion to read Jeffrey Sachs' book, End of Poverty. It's an excellent book. Whether there is a realization of the goal or not is another question. The book is excellent. Thank you very much. Now, having heard theoretical and also practical analysis of the economy of the country, and also through budgetary mechanism, we must also address issues as to how to reduce unemployment in the country. And I have purposely and very deliberately brought a new subject. As very rightly said, manufacturing is one way of reducing unemployment. Even service sector can play a big role. The service sector, for which India has tremendous potentialities, is tourism. And that itself can create employment. We have Professor, Mr. Virenchi Mishra is also a professor. He teaches and to speak on the subject. And I will like everybody to listen to him patiently. He will speak for 10 minutes and he will summarize how employment can be generated through rural tourism, after explaining how the tourism itself can play a big role in providing employment to the youth. Thank you very much. Now, Mr. Virenchi Mishra. Thank you. Go ahead. Floor is yours.
समस्तंको नमस्कार प्रोफेसर सत्यनारायण मिश्रंकर ये प्रेजेंटेशन सुनिला परे मो प्रेजेंटेशन मो कथाबार्ता टिके फिका लगी पारे किंतु मु कंसंट्रेट करिबी पर्यटन क्षेत्र रे जोटा विवेक सर कहिले आमे बजेट रे जहा व्यवस्था करूछु ताहा देशर अर्थनीति को उठेबा पई एवं अर्थनीति जरिया रे अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट को दूर करिया पई से भीतर पर्यटन गोटे एभली क्षेत्र जो एम्प्लॉयमेंट पर्याप्त सुजोग रही तार गोटे कारण हूँ पर्यटन बोली गोटे निर्दिष्ट विषय किसी ना पर्यटन हूँ बहु गुड़े एक्टिविटीज समाहार इट्स ए कॉन्ग्लोमरेशन ऑफ सेवरल एक्टिविटीज तेणुक जो पर्यटन विकास कथा कहुए आम हूँ गोटे सेक्टर नुहे बहुत गुड़े सेक्टर विकास कथा आम कही जोटा प्रोफेसर मिश्र कहले मैन्युफैक्चरिंग सेक्टर से मैन्युफैक्चरिंग सेक्टर को आरंभ करी सर्विस सेक्टर एवं अन्य सेक्टर में भर कथबार्ता करूँ तेणु पर्यटन विकास सहित दारिद्र्य दूरीकरण एवं बेकारी दूरीकरण घनिष्ठ संपर्क रही आमर एक परिसंख्यान कहूँ जे पर्यटन क्षेत्र में 10 लाख टंका विनियोग आम जब करवा से प्राय 89टी नियुक्ति सुजोग आम सृष्टि कर 89 जॉब्स कैन बी क्रिएटेड इन द टूरिज्म सेक्टर जदि आम 1 मिलियन रुपीज आम इन्वेस्ट कर किसी छोट कथा नुहे अन्य क्षेत्र में हूँ लेबर इंटेंसिव इंडस्ट्री अन्य क्षेत्र में कैपिटल इंटेंसिव हो पारे बहुत कैपिटल दरकार पड़ पारे किंतु पर्यटन क्षेत्र एभली गोटे क्षेत्र जो हूँ जीरो इन्वेस्टमेंट आरंभ कर ह्यूज इन्वेस्टमेंट पर्यटन दरकार पड़ पारे किंतु यही क्षेत्र में हूँ आम जो सामग्रिक भाव सामूहिक भाव देखा जे गोटे 10 लाख टंका विनियोग आम 89 जॉब्स क्रिएट कर एमती देखा गले पर्यटन क्षेत्र में 3 प्रकार नियुक्तिर सुजोग रही गोटे है प्रत्यक्ष नियुक्ति गोटे है परोक्ष नियुक्ति आ गोटे है इंड्यूस्ड नियुक्ति इंड्यूस्ड लेबर जो मैंने हूँ सीधा सड़क पर्यटन क्षेत्र में काम करते प्रत्यक्ष नियुक्ति पाती पर्यटन क्षेत्र को सहायता करने जो मैंने आसती से होती परोक्ष नियुक्ति पाती एवं परोक्ष नियुक्ति जो लोक जो मैंने साहाय्य करते इंड्यूस्ड लेबर कैटेगरी से जाती एवं यार अनुपात हूँ 1:3:8 पर्यटन क्षेत्र में गोटे 10 सीधा सड़क नियुक्ति जदि आम दे पारे तार गोटे कैस्केडिंग इफेक्ट अच्छी कैस्केडिंग फॉल अच्छी से अनुसार 3टी परोक्ष नियुक्ति एवं 8टी हूँ इंड्यूस्ड नियुक्ति आम सुजोग ऑटोमेटिकली से सृष्टि हो जाए तेणु पर्यटन हूँ एभली गोटे क्षेत्र जो हूँ आम नियुक्तिर अपर्याप्त सुजोग आम रही आम कर वर्तमान परिप्रेक्षी प्रायतः ग्लोबल कथा देखा 10टी नियुक्ति 10टी वर्कफोर्स रे गोटे वर्कफोर्स हूँ पर्यटन सेक्टर में काम कर So 10% of the total workforce of the world is from the tourism sector. भारत में ताहा प्राय 8% रही एवं यह को आमको टिके बढ़िया चाहिए पर्यटन क्षेत्र को आम व्यापक सुजोग सृष्टि करने दरकार व्यापक परिस्थिति सृष्टि करने दरकार जो पर्यटन विकास लाभ करें आम बजेट जो व्यवस्था करूँ बजेट व्यवस्थाटा केवल अर्थनीतिर व्यवस्था हो जाए किंतु सिथिर सुफल हमको सेतेबेले मिले जेतेबेले हम ताको कार्यान्वयन करू जेतेबेले रूपायन क्षेत्र को आसू सेही क्षेत्र ही हमको सुफल मिलिबो हम तार फल पाइबा नहले केवल सेटा पथि बैगण होइके रहिबो बाड़ी बैगण होई परिबो ना तेणु पर्यटन क्षेत्र में जो विनियोग करा जाए तार केमिति होची वास्तव क्षेत्र में प्रतिफलन करा जाउची तार केतोटी मोर अनुभूति रो कहिबी किछटा होची पुराना अनुभूति किछटा होची एवर अनुभूति मो आपन मानक संगे शेयर करिया पई चाहिबी जेतेबेले होची पर्यटन विभाग नूतन भाव में सृष्टि हला 1973 मसिया रे कोइन्सिडेंटली होची नूतन भाव में सृष्टि होता पर्यटन विभाग मु प्रथम अधिकारी भाव में नियुक्ति पाइतिली 1973 मसिया रे एवं ता परठो जेतेबेले होची नुआ एक डिपार्टमेंट आरंभ हला सेतेबेले को होची 8टी पर्यटन कार्यालय एवं 5टी पांथलीवास थिला किंतु ताकू जदि हम संप्रसारण न करिबा ताले होची हमर अभिवृद्धि होबो नै एवं नियुक्तिर सुयोग मध्ये अधिक होबो नै एई दृष्टि काम कला बेले 1970 एवं 1980 दशक रे जेतेबेले विवेक पटनायक सर पर्यटन विभाग निर्देशक थिले एवं 80 दशक रे होची पर्यटन विभाग सचिव भाव में काम करथिले सेतेबेले होची बजेट रे जहा प्रोविजन हम कलु सेही अनुसार होची तार हम प्रति वर्ष पर्यायक्रमे नुआ पर्यटन कार्यालय नुआ पांथलीवास पांथशाला नुआ पर्यटन काउंटर एभली भाव सृष्टि कर गलु प्राय 1990 शेष बेलू आम 5टी पांथलीवास प्राय 20टी पांथलीवास सृष्टि होता 8टी पर्यटन कार्यालय हूँ 19टी कार्यालय होता पर्यटन काउंटर प्राय नाला आम पाखे प्राय 16टी पर्यटन काउंटर नुआ या फल निजुक्तिर आम जो सुजोग सृष्टि कलु ताद्वारा हूँ समाज में हूँ बहुत गुड़े निजुक्ति सुजोग सृष्टि हो पारा तेणु बजेट जो प्रोविजन अच्छी ताकू नहीं गोटे केमिति सृष्टि करा जाई परिबो निजुक्ति सुजोग पर्यटन क्षेत्र तार गोटे उदाहरण मु आपन देली आ गोटे होची एबर उदाहरण आपन दउची गोटे होची जे पर्यटन धीरे आग मु जेते जॉइन कले पर्यटन विभाग से पर्यटन को शिक्षा हिसाब रे निया जाउ नथिला पर्यटन होची एमती हमर ट्रेडिशनल जहा हॉस्पिटैलिटी सेक्टर हमर थिला अतिथि देवो भव से प्रक्रिया आमर चली फॉर्मल एजुकेशन जोटा प्रोफेसर मिश्र भी कहते एजुकेशन कथा फॉर्मल एजुकेशन नाला 1973 मसीह प्रथम कर गोटे फूड क्राफ्ट इंस्टीट्यूट भुवनेश्वर आरंभ है तापर 1985 मसीह हूँ गोदावरी इंस्टीट्यूट और रिजनल कॉलेज मैनेजमेंट आरंभ है पर्यटन और होटेल मैनेजमेंट शिक्षा देवाई हूँ अनेक क्षेत्र में पर्यटन और होटेल मैनेजमेंट शिक्षा देते प्राय ओडिशा रे 100टी एभली शिक्षानुष्ठान अच्छी जो मैंने जो पर्यटन और हॉस्पिटैलिटी सेक्टर शिक्षा दि जाउची तो सेही ताकू एते जेहेतु एमाने तो होचे पर्यटन क्षेत्र में काम करिवे जो माने होटेल मैनेजमेंट सेक्टर में काम कले सेमानक पई होचे होटेल नुआना होटेल माने तयारी हैला सेतिर में ओडिशा आपण मानक मने थो 1980 मसिया रे होटेल को प्रथम पर ओडिशा प्रथम राज्य जोटा होटेल को होचे इंडस्ट्री हिसाब रे डिक्लेयर करले एवं जार सफल आज हम देखु ओडिशा रे एते होटेल संख्या आसीची तार श्रेय मध्य किछटा विवेक पटनायक पाख बुझीबो बेक जेतेबेले होचे एटा डिक्लेयर करा गेला सेतेबेले से इपिकल चेयरमैन हिसाब रे बहुत गुडे होटेल को होचे फाइनेंस करिसंती जा फल रे होची आज एते होटेल संख्या बढ़ीची किंतु जो माने होची अन्य सेक्टर काम कले पर्यटन मैनेजमेंट सेक्टर काम कले तांका पय होची नियुक्ति सुयोग रो टिके अभाव रहउतला तेणु ए गला 4-5 वर्ष तले पर्यटन को एक इच्छाधीन विषय भाव में हाई स्कूल रे इंट्रोड्यूस करा जाइछि नवम दशम एकादश और द्वादश श्रेणी रे आगुरु ताहा एक वोकेशनल ट्रेनिंग हिसाब सब्जेक्ट हिसाब रे थिला किबा होचे पोस्ट ग्रेजुएट लेवल ले केवल से पाठ पढ़ा होतिला किंतु एबे गला 4-5 वर्ष हैला हाई स्कूल रे होची नवम श्रेणी रो आरंभ करी नवम दशम एकादश द्वादश एथिरे होची पर्यटन एवं हॉस्पिटल मैनेजमेंट को एक शिक्षा इच्छाधीन विषय भाव इंट्रोड्यूस करा जाइछि ता फल रे पर्यटन विषय तो पिला शिक्षा पाउछंती एही पाठ पढ़ैया पे जो माने आगुर पर्यटन पढ़िथिले पर्यटन पाठर तालीम पाइथिले सेमानकर मध्य नियुक्ति सुयोग बढ़ी जाइछि एबे मु किछ परिसंख्यान मु नउथिली प्रायतः जति जन मोर अंततः जति जन छात्र अछंती गला 30 वर्ष भीतर जति छात्र सृष्टि होइचंती तांका भीतर प्रायतः समस्ते नियुक्ति पाई जाइछंती पर्यटन शिक्षा अनुष्ठान मानकर जोटी पर्यटन पाठ पढ़ा जाइछि सेही बड़ी सेही 4-5 वर्ष 6 वर्ष तले रूरल टूरिज्म एवं इको टूरिज्म को मिसई करी फॉरेस्ट डिपार्टमेंट वन विभाग हूँ गोटे स्कीम आरंभ कले इको टूरिज्म कैंप बोली गोटे कार्यक्रम आरंभ कले जो हूँ गाँ परिवेश ग्राम्य परिवेश हूँ गोटे पर्यटक मानक हूँ कैंपिंग सुजोग से टेंट रे पारे कि चाल घर हो पारे कि गोटे कोठा घर हो पारे किंतु सेटा गाँव में पर्यवसित अच्छी एवं इको टूरिज्म रो कांसेप्ट जहाँ अच्छे ताकू नजर रे रखिकरी सेटा डेवलप कराई ग्राम गोटे कमिटी करा से कमिटी हूँ तार परिचालना दायित्व नहीं फॉरेस्ट डिपार्टमेंट ताको हूँ ओवरऑल मैनेजमेंट करुच्ची ओवरऑल सुपरविजन करुच्ची किंतु ये 50 जगह ओडिशार इको कैंप गढ़ी उठी जो हूँ से स्थानीय लोक मैंने हूँ पर्याप्त निजुक्ति सुजोग पाई यही तो गला आपणकर आम बजेट जहाँ व्यवस्था करूँ से क्षेत्र में काम करने आसवा मो हिसाब मुझे देखुली केतोटी सेक्टर अच्छी पर्यटन क्षेत्र में जो बजेट आवश्यकता पड़ो ना निजुक्ति सुजोग सृष्टि करने तो हूँ प्रत्यक्ष परोक्ष और इंडस्ट्रियल लेबर सृष्टि हुए किंतु आम जब केवल आमर नीतिगत निष्पत्ति ना प्रशासनिक निष्पत्ति ना राजनैतिक इच्छा शक्ति जब तार थी आम हूँ निजुक्ति सुजोग सृष्टि करा हूँ गोटे गाइडिंग सेक्टर स्वदेश पट्टनायक भी जो थे गोपबंधु एकाडेमी आम विवेक पट्टनायक समय आम आरंभ कर 1983 मसीह प्रथम थर पर ओडिशा गाइड ट्रेनिंग प्रोग्राम आरंभ होता हूँ अनेक प्रकार कार्यक्रम आम आरंभ करूँ से गाइड मैंने जो ट्रेनिंग नौ गाइड मान ट्रेनिंग पाइला जी सामान्य खर्च हम ट्रेनिंग देवाई सेतक छाड़देला से हूँ आत्मनिजुक्तिर अनेक सुजोग पाइबे एवं यही आत्मनिजुक्ति सुजोग देवाई निकट अतीत ट्राइबल एरिया रे गोटे स्कीम ओडिशा सरकार नहीं जो ट्राइबल एरिया को हम टूरिस्ट मैंने जाऊे विशेषकर फॉरेन टूरिस्ट मैंने जाऊे से जोगाजोग गोटे समस्या सृष्टि करूला स्थानीय लोकों सहित जोगाजोग कर असुविधा होता तेणु अनुभव करागला जे स्थानीय लोकंकर साहाय्य न नहीं पर्यटक मान ट्राइबल एरिया को नहीं सुविधा हम नहीं सेफ भी नुहे तेणुक स्थानीय लोकों केवल ट्राइबल यूथ मान गोटे पर्यटन तालीम केन्द्र तालीम शिक्षा आरंभ करागला एवं जी लोक आम तालीम देलु से मैंने पर्यटक मान गाइड हिसाब से कम कर ओडिशा सरकार नीति बर्तमान रही जो मैंने ट्राइबल एरिया को जीवे विशेषकर फॉरेन टूरिस्ट मैंने जो जीवे से हूँ जड़े गाइड स्थानीय गाइड हूँ भुवनेश्वर कि अन्य जगह जो गाइड जाइथंतु ता सहित स्थानीय गाइड जड़े से नवा बाध्य है ये व्यवस्था करा तेणुक से जो पैकेज दिया हुए से पैकेज रे हूँ स्थानीय गाइड तादेह रहती जहाद्वारा हूँ जो मैंने गाइड ट्रेनिंग ले पर्याप्त सुजोग सृष्टि है ए संपर्क में मोर गोटे केतरा प्रस्ताव मुझे दौली से विषय आलोचना चली आमर अनेक क्षेत्र अच्छी जो जगह हूँ पर्यटक मैंने गाइड एवं नहीं जाऊना फल कौन हूँ जो मैंने गाइड ट्रेनिंग नौ हूँ किसी दिन गाइडिंग कलापर देखुं पर्याप्त सुजोग मिलूना तेणुक से अन्य सेक्टर को चली जाऊँच कि हूँ बेकार होकर रोच तार एक समाधान सूत्र भाव में आमर केतोटी एमती तो हूँ गाइड जड़े नहीं गले गोटे पर्यटक हूँ ज्ञानटा अधिक निश्चित भाव में हम निजे निजे बुलवा अपेक्षा तो आम जब केतोटी क्षेत्र में गाइड सर्विसेसटा को कंपलसरी कर जो जगह हूँ आम आवश्यकता पड़ुचे तुम इको टूरिज्म सेंटर मान को आम नहीं जाऊँ अभयारण्य भितर को आम पर्यटक मान को नहीं जाऊँ चिलिका भितर को आम नहीं जाऊँ नंदनकानन भितर को आम नहीं जाऊँ जो जगह हूँ केतोटी पर्यटक मान केतोटी आईन कानून मानवा जरूरी हुए से जगह हूँ पर्यटक मान सर्विसेस नि पार तेणु जो जो जगह को हूँ आमर पर्यटक मान जाऊँच से जगह आम जो टिकट सिस्टम होची से टिकट सिस्टम रे गाइड चार्जेस इनपुट कर पर्यटक मान मत किसी मना करेंगे ना से चार्जेस देवाई तेणु से जगह सुजोग रही जो जगह हूँ गाइड मान पर्याप्त एम्प्लॉयमेंट आम दे पार तो ये भाव में पर्यटन क्षेत्र में अनेक जगह अच्छी जो जगह हूँ बजेट किसी व्यवस्था करी अल्प किसी इन्वेस्टमेंट करी एवं अनेक क्षेत्र में हूँ बिना इन्वेस्टमेंट बिना बजेट प्रोविजन आम निजुक्ति सुजोग सृष्टि कर पर्यटन क्षेत्र में तार संभावना रही चलित वर्षर बजेट को आम जब देखा जे जो हूँ केन्द्र पर्यटन विभाग पूर्व वर्ष आमर बजेट थिला प्राय 2026 कोटी टंका ए वर्ष ताहा बढ़ी के 2400 कोटी टंका ହେଇଛି सेही भितर होची 2644 कोटी टंका केवल भित्तिभूमिर विकास में विनियोग हबो एवं भित्तिभूमिर विकास कहले जोटा होची मैन्युफैक्चरिंग सेक्टर आरंभ करी अन्य सेक्टर आरंभ हबो ताकू मिसई करी नियुक्ति सुजोग रो सृष्टि संभावना तादरे रहिछि पब्लिसिटी प्रोग्राम टाइम मध्य 235 कोटी 421 कोटी टंका पब्लिसिटी प्रोग्राम टाइम रहिछि डिजिटल दुनिया रे आजिकल होचे विभिन्न प्रकार जो डिजिटल पब्लिसिटी काम करो जे सेते पय मध्य परोक्ष नियुक्ति अनेक सेते सृष्टि ही परिबो स्वदेश दर्शन पय होचे 1181 कोटी टंका एवं प्रसाद योजना रे 235 कोटी टंकार व्यवस्था करा जायछि तो विभिन्न सेक्टर रे पर्यटक मानन के जोबारे जाउछंती तांको सहायता करिया पय जो जो आनुषंगिक व्यवस्था दरकार जो थिरे होची ए बजट व्यवस्था द्वारा अनेक नियुक्ति सुजोग सृष्टि ही परिबो सेमती होची पर्वतमाला योजना अनुसार 8टी नुआ रोपवे निर्माण करबार जो व्यवस्था अछि यह मते अनेकटा नियुक्ति सुजोग सृष्टि करिवो आम देश रे तेणु पर्यटन क्षेत्र में एभली गोटे क्षेत्र जोठी होची पर्याप्त नियुक्ति सुजोग सृष्टि करिवार संभावना रहिछि आमर बेले बेले कोन हुए पर्यटन कंट्रीब्यूशन टू द जीडीपी वर्ल्ड जीडीपी पे 10.4% भारत पे 9.4% अछि ताको बढ़िया पे होची हमर व्यवस्था कथबार्ता चालू छै धीरे धीरे जेमति बढ़िबो पर्यटन कंट्रीब्यूशन जहाँ ताहा विभिन्न सेक्टर तो परोक्ष भाव में आसे तेणुक सीधा सड़क आम के पर्यटन आय करुचु ताहार जहाँ गुरुत्व रही अधिक गुरुत्व रही केते जन पर्यटक आसिले एवं को जगह आम पर्यटन क्षेत्र में विकसित है ग्राम्य जोटा एमएसएमई कथा मिश्र सर कहते ग्राम्य पर्यटन से गोटे सेक्टर जो जगह होची आमर इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर से प्रायतः रेडी अच्छी आमको केवल हूँ कनेक्टिविटी और अन्य आनुषंगिक सुविधा सरकार जब हैंड होल्डिंग किसी आप देवे ताहले हूँ से जगह हूँ ग्राम्य पर्यटन प्रभुत विकास हो पार आमको से अधिका इन्वेस्टमेंट करार आवश्यकता ना से जो मैंने स्थानीय लोक रही से मैंने ही से पर्यटन विकास में साहाय्य करें स्थानीय आम जो क्राफ्ट रहा स्थानीय जो डांस रहा स्थानीय जो एग्रीकल्चर रहा गाँव रोचे जहाँ जहाँ अच्छी सब जाक पर्यटक मान आकृष्ट करने विनियोग करपरिक पान बरजा हूँ पर्यटक मान आकृष्ट करे केमी हूँ पानी कूर पानी उठाती तेंडा साहाय्य सेटा पर्यटक मान आकृष्ट करे नड़िया केमी गचर तोला जाए ताहा पर्यटक मान आकृष्ट करे तेणु आम ग्राम्य पर्यटन विकास एवं इको टूरिज्म विकास क्षेत्र में जदि आम कार्य करिपरिबा बहुत गुड़े नियुक्ति सुजोग आम सृष्टि पर्यटन समय स्वल्पता दृष्टि अधिक किसी कहूना किंतु पर्यटन एक व्यापक क्षेत्र जो जगह हूँ नियुक्ति सुजोग अपर्याप्त रही जोटा मुझे कहली आउ थे मन पकई दूसरी 1:3:8 यही रेशियो आमर नियुक्ति सुजोग सृष्टि हुए एवं ए लिस्ट ऑफ इन्वेस्टमेंट रे बेस्ट ऑफ एम्प्लॉयमेंट सुजोग रही आपण समस्त को धन्यवाद मो कथा सुनी नमस्कार
बहुत धन्यवाद वीरेंच बाबू आपण ओडिया रे एते प्रांजल भाव रे एई पर्यटन पर लोक बुझाइले सेतमे आपण को मु साधुवाद जणाउछि इट वाज एन एक्सीलेंट प्रेजेंटेशन my recommendation to you will be to what you spoke today. You spoke in Odia. Please write this in a newspaper in Odisha. The Samba, the Samaj, Dharitri, Kimba, Pramaya, people will come to know what opportunity exists in the sector of tourism. Since I'm speaking from Costa Rica, is a country of which is called the Switzerland of Latin America. It attracts large number of tourists from Europe and North America. I know how a small country can exploit tourist potential. এই কনটেক্সটରେ ମୁଁ କହିବି ଯେ ଅଳ୍ପ ଦିନ କେତେ ଦିନ ତଳେ ମୁଁ ଗୋଟେ ଲେଖିଥିଲି ଆର୍ଟିକଲ on potentialities of rural tourism in Odisha. That was published in Political Business Daily. बरदा प्रश्न दास ताको पाइचंती मु तांको अनुरोध करिबी जे से समस्त को से आर्टिकल टाको देबे पढ़िबे से माने सेतरे मोर आइडिया मु देछि बहुत धन्यवाद आई थिंक आम दी जन को लेक्चर में शुणी सारू और समय तर केते समय अच्छे मुझे प्रहराज अरुण कुमार प्रहराज से बहरीन रु आसचंती से गोटे समीक्षा करेंगे से समीक्षाटा भाव से प्रथम कर दिंतु कारण दुईटा क्वेश्चन अच्छी चैट बॉक्स से डॉक्टर नमिता पटनायक देचंती गोटे से प्रोफेसर एसएन मिश्र कैन आंसर इट प्रथम मु कहबी जे हमर डॉक्टर अरुण कुमार प्रधान प्रहराज बहरीन रु आसिकरी समीक्षा करेंगे से तांकर वक्तव्य दिंतु 10 मिनट भीतर 5-10 मिनट धन्यवाद
2 मिनट्स
डॉक्टर प्रहराज अनम्यूट करंतु
जय जगन्नाथ am I audible sir
हाँ yes
इंग्लोमेसी थिंक टैंक इंग्लोमेसी एवं थिंक टैंक ओडिशा और थिंकर्स क्लब आनुकूल्य रे आयोजन हेतिबा आज वेबिनार नूतन बजेट और बेकारी दूरीकरण प्रसंग रे सभापतित्व करुवा श्रीजुक्त विवेक पटनायक महोदय नमस्कार मुख्य वक्ता श्रीजुक्त सत्यनारायण मिश्र महोदय अन्यतम वक्ता श्रीजुक्त विरंची मिश्र महोदय आयोजक तथा संयोजक श्रीजुक्त वरदा प्रसन्न दास महोदय तथा उपस्थित बुद्धिजीवी नागरिक समाज को मोर किंगडम ऑफ बहरीन रु यथा सम्मान अभिवादन जनाउछि एथि सहित समस्त बुद्धिजीवी गुरुजन देशर बजेट उपरे तांकर समय उपयोगी उद्बोधन और मतामत देथिबारु आपण माननकु मु हृदय धन्यवाद अर्पण करूछि इट वाज रियली एन एक्सीलेंट वेबिनार आई हैव नेवर एक्सपीरियंस्ड इट सांप्रतिक समय उपयोगी सामाजिक और बौद्धिक चेतना जागरण निमंते एक प्रसंग चयन करथिबारु मु आदरणीय विवेक सर को हृदय धन्यवाद अर्पण करूछि एवं ये अनुष्ठान और कर्मकर्ता को साधुवाद जनाउछि उपस्थित वक्ता बजेट रो नानादी दिग उपरे विशद आलोकपात करि सारछंती आज रविवार आम देशर कर्म संस्कृति अनुजाई रविवार छुट्टी दिन नुहे तेणु कार्य क्षेत्र रे व्यस्त थिबारु आपण मानकर अधिक समय नेबे नाही आई एम grateful to Professor S.N. Mishra for decoding the Indian economy and the Indian budget in a very comprehensive manner and he touched every aspect of the Indian economy with his practical experience. Professor Mishra pointed out that unemployment is growing because growth in manufacturing sector is stagnant. And we have to increase the manufacturing sector from 16% to 25% of the Indian GDP and to create more manufacturing hubs in India. But the budget deficit and the inflation remains major concerns. Growth and human developments are two wheels of the economy. Very well said, sir. Thank you very much for the very beautiful, very detailed insight of the Indian budget. The budget was truly a bit disappointing because there was not much incentive for industry, which can truly solve majority of the problems such as growth, employment, and deficit. Professor Viranchi Mishra, sir, explained the impact of tourism and employment in a very interesting manner and said tourism can play a big role in providing growth and employment. It was very interesting to know that if rupees 10 lakh is spent on tourism, it can create 89 jobs directly or indirectly. It's really very interesting finding, and we the NRI community must work on it. In fact, tourism is my favorite subject and I'm trying to work out something specifically for Odisha. I would rather say if we concentrate on tourism and real estate sector, it will solve the problem of unemployment. Now it is no secret that a human being's basic necessities can be summed up as food, clothing, and shelter. Roti, kapda, or makan. If we were to truly focus on real estate or tourism, the makan, say for example, makan itself, the other two would automatically follow, as it would have a dynamic impact on other aspects of the economy. For example, steel, cement, interior decoration, furniture, fixtures, home appliances, domestic demand, and massive employment opportunities will be created as a natural response. On this occasion, I also request this forum and the NRI community from Odisha to work towards a special project to open a center of excellence dedicated to the tourism and real estate sector in Bhubaneswar. आउ अधिक मु कहबिनी आ समय नेबिनी हमर आपणकर एथि मोर वाणी को विश्राम देउची शेष रे एति की कहबी देशर गठन दिगरे आम समस्तक एही परि योगदान आम देश को दिने विश्व रे उन्नत करी गढ़ी तोलिबो यह निसंदेह। दूर विदेश रु मोर जन्मभूमि ओडिशा एवं आपण माननकु भूमिष्ठ प्रणाम जनाउची। जय जगन्नाथ, वंदे उत्कल जननी, जय हिंद।
Thank you very much. Bahut dhanyabad. Excellent. You summed it up and you made a very good review. Congratulations. I'll be very happy when I'm back in Odisha, and if you're in Odisha, please try to contact me. You are a very positive person. You have requested NRI community to get into the subject of creation employment through tourism and real estate. Very good. Thank you very much. Congratulations.
Thank you very much, sir.
There is one question, there are two questions by one person, Dr. Namita Patnaik. I'm sure Professor Mishra must have seen it in the chat box. Professor Mishra, can you please give a response to that? Thank you very much.
I can't see it, sir. I can't see it.
Oh, you can't see it. Okay, I will read it out for you.
Please, sir.
I'll read it out. It is actually from...
So the question is how to motivate for social sector investment.
How to?
How to motivate.
How to motivate social sector
for social sector investment.
Okay,
and also he has written. And also he has written.
She has also put another question.
He has also written: is there any effect of climatic condition on unemployment so far the skill of the labor class is concerned?
As far as the first question is concerned, you know, if we are looking at the social sector, I'll divide it into 4 parts. As far as the education sector is concerned, it is a concurrent subject. And as I have very clearly mentioned, that there are quite a few states like Kerala, like Tamil Nadu, like Delhi, who are spending close to 25% of their budget on education. So not only their human development index literacy percentage is high, there is a significant improvement in the quality of the government schools. The NP, the National Education Policy, has also mentioned that most of the states should increase their allocation from about 10 to 12% to about 20%. This is what the NEP has said. So therefore, it is high time that we don't outsource this merit goods sector. Even in the United States, you'll find that basic schooling is the responsibility of the government. In fact, just about 7 to 8% go to private schools. So I think even in a purely market-driven society, like most of the Western European countries and US, they spend quite handsomely on education. I didn't show the comparative global figure, but on an average, most of the countries spend more than 7 to 8% in education, compared to about 3% in India. The other is the health sector. Now, in the health sector, the problem is affordability. You can get quality healthcare, but affordability is a big challenge. Now, my experience during the pandemic has been that the government hospitals performed as well as the private hospitals. I had my basic first dose in the Capital Hospital, and had booster in a private hospital. And I must say that they were equally good. The private hospital charged me 1,200 rupees. So if we want it, we can really make our hospitals also cost effective and ensure that the services are provided. The last thing I would like to mention about the health sector is that the insurance model which we are following based on the US experience is a very flawed model. The National Health Service model of UK, I think, is very, very apt for India, where they spend just about 6 to 7% of the GDP. But the basic healthcare facility has been very, very good. So it's very unfortunate. There is a recent article comparing the National Health Service and the US insurance model. And they find that in the US, they spend close to 12 to 13% in the insurance-driven model, whereas in the UK, with a fairly same kind of service, it's just about 6 to 7%. So basically, the insurance model is more expensive. So therefore, we have to give priority to this. As for your second question is concerned about impact of environment on employment, it is true that India is not a monolithic country. You have deserts, you have plains, you have hills. So therefore, the skilling becomes a very important area. There's a recent study on Rajasthan. You know, Rajasthan is one of the few states which reformed its labor laws as early as 2015. But they find that there is not much of an improvement in their manufacturing footprints because the enabling conditions for workers to work better, the quality of skilling, that leave a lot to be desired. You know, when we speak of quality or skill India, one of the unfortunate outcomes has been the quality of skilling. Employability out of Skill India initiative has been just about 7 to 8%. So we not only need to expand our skilling base, but we need to also improve on quality. So these are my few points, and you know, it all depends on political will. What kind of priority it gives to the society, the scheme that you want to invest in. Like for instance, in the Ujala scheme, we did extremely well in the beginning. So therefore, wherever the government has put its political will, I'm quite surprised. Many people ask me that you know, Nehru was such an educated leader. Why did he not put priority into education and health? I do not find much of a explanation to that. So it's a very, very sad story. Professor Vivek Patnaik, my senior mentor, is here. It is something which bothers me, that why did we not spend adequately on education and health right from the from our first plan? And it's a saga of very low expenditure both by the center and the states, barring certain examples that I mentioned. So I hope I have answered your question.
Sure. The next one. Sir, our People's Welfare Suggestion Forum, Dr. Engineer Nandanandan Das.
Thank you very much, Professor. You have given the answer. And there are two other questions, but I don't think there is time will permit, but those are relevant questions which will be answered if by Professor separately in another forum, in another means of communication. And Bharada Prasanna Das can pick up from the chat box and pass it on to Professor Mishra. I think we have had a very good comprehensive discussion on the subject of budget. We heard a very eminent learned person like Professor Mishra, who has not only theoretical experience, but also practical experience. Then
is there any question from any public?
Just 1 minute, let me just finish. There is one more thing I must say. The professor, I won't say, he's not professor in real sense, Virenchi Mishra, spoke in Odia, but covered the subject of tourism, which is actually a source of, is a source from where the employment can be generated. And he spoke extremely well. Well, I think we have taken almost 1 hour or more. Sorry, 1.5 hours. 1.5 hours. Yes, for people in India, it is quite late. For me in Costa Rica, I'm fresh and agile, I can speak, but I would, for due respect for the people in India who are mostly attending this meeting, I would not take it further. I will, although I would have given my concluding remarks, but it is not time for me to give concluding remarks. Whatever remarks I would like to give, I will give in another forum. So with this, let me request Professor Barada Prasanna Das to give his vote of thanks and bring end to this excellent discussion. I must acknowledge the presence of Mr. S.K. Mahanti from United States. He is a prominent member of think tank. He is also from the All India Service. He is from the Ordnance Factory Service, and he has a wide experience. I acknowledge the presence of Swadesh Patnaik, who is, and also Sanjay Kumar Panda. They're all very eminent people. I would recommend to Barada Prasanna Das that Thinkers Club should invite sometime Mr. Sanjay Kumar Panda to speak on another subject which is very dear to his heart and also dear to me, how to create employment and increase the income in the textile sector, in the handloom sector. In fact, I'm trying to establish contact for him in Costa Rica for export of handloom products from Odisha. Thank you very much. Now, Mr. Barada Prasanna Das.
Sir, धन्यवाद सर. आपण कोस्टा रिका रो बहुत मूल्यवान समय देई हम सभार अध्यक्षता करथिले. Among you have shown interest to conduct this type of seminars to help the unemployment and the development of the poor sector. आपण ए दिगरे हमको उत्साहित करछंती तेणु आपण बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद. हम गणरे आज मुख्य वक्ता रूपे प्रोफेसर सत्यनारायण मिश्र. He has shown his interest to present very nice theory on the unemployment scheme and the present budget scenario. तापरे श्रीयुक्त वीरेंद्र मिश्र से भी पर्यटन एवं बेकारी दूरीकरण किपरि सहायक हेबो से संपर्क रे बहुत तथ्य देई आम मानक अपेक्षित करछंती. एवं आम गण रे अछंती बाहरीन रो दादा भाई कंपनी रो सीईओ चार्टर्ड अकाउंटेंट एवं विशेष करी ओडिया समाज रो प्रतिष्ठाता बाहरीन रे एवं सब बेले से असहाय को हेल्प करिबारे तंकर समय जाए एवं से आग्रह प्रकाश करी आम सहित योगदान करथिबारु बाहरीन रो मु तांकु धन्यवाद देउची. एवं आज आम गण रे जो माने हमको सुनि पारुचंती एवं जो माने हम यूट्यूब लिंक को भरे भविष्य रे सुनि पारुथिबे. मु केते गुडे मेसेज पाउचे से माने टाइम दे आसपाउनांती एवं आज आमे अनुरोध करथिलो हमरो पूर्वतन एमपी खारबड़ स्वयं को से फुलबाणी रचंती से बहुत आग्रह प्रकाश करथिले योगदान बा पई. से बर्तन फेरुचंती कले मु चेष्टा करछि बाटरे सेठी जदी नेट प्रोवाइड होबो कि नाही आ मु निश्चित भाव रे आपनकर सुनिबी एवं भविष्य रे जोग देबी. एवं आज आम गण जदी थिबे हमर डॉक्टर इंजीनियर नंदनंदन दास जे कि एक्स सेक्रेटरी वर्क्स डिपार्टमेंट एवं से वर्तमान वेलफेयर ऑफ थिकन्स फोरम करी हमर प्राइम मिनिस्टर को सब बेले चिट्ठी दबारे व्यस्त एवं से जते गुडे चिट्ठी दैछंती ताको कंपाइल करी दुटा पुस्तक कर सारले. से मध्ये चाहिले आज हमर ए आलोचना को प्राइम मिनिस्टर को मेमोरेंडम आकार दे परिबे. हमें भी तांको अनुरोध करबा ही विल सबमिट ए मेमोरेंडम ऑन आवर टुडेस डिस्कशन. आउ जो माने हम कथा सुनि परछंती एवं हम सहित अंशग्रहण करछंती समस्त को हमें धन्यवाद देउछु. एवं आपन को अनुरोध करिबी हमर व्यूअर्स 7000 व्यूअर्स हेलेनी किंतु मात्र सब्सक्राइब करछंती 300. तेणु आमे अनुरोध करिबु जो माने हमर वीडियो देखिबे से माने सब्सक्राइब करिबे एवं ए दिगरे हमको सहायता करिया पे आपण मान समस्त अनुरोध करी आज एइथरे हमें हमर आलोचना टिकु